Thank you all for joining us, and this is the annual overview of IHE-RO. I am Mark Pepelea. I work for Philips Healthcare on the Pinnacle product, and I am one of the co-chairs of the planning committee, and we'll get more into details in a minute. And this is what I hope to share with you today is what is IHE-RO, what do we do, and a little bit of how we work. And then most importantly is how you'll be able to participate in this and help us out, because we most definitely need people to help us. So what's IHE? We toss around that acronym a lot. It's integrating the healthcare enterprise. Overall, it is simply, well, I simply summarize it as we are interested, every single group in IHE, in improving connectivity, interoperability, with the idea that this will help us do better treatments for our patients, and that's across the board. And IHE has many, many groups. There's CT, there's radiology, there's dental, there's a massive number of groups you can see on the website. But IHE-RO is specifically IHE for radiation oncology. And as I'm sure you're all aware, that transmission of information correctly, and the correct information, and interoperability is a huge deal, because it is possible to have something that's DICOM compliant, but still not have interoperability with it, or at least good interoperability. And we also believe this has a strong influence on patient safety because of the way we specify things and the way we treat their needs. Why is it important? Kind of already said that it is a way we think to help with patient safety and to help with efficiency in the clinic. One of the things that as a vendor I particularly enjoy is this last one listed here, the last point, that it provides a mechanism for different manufacturers to sit down and test with each other live, and we do that through the Connect-a-thon. I find that to be one of the most important aspects of it as a vendor. A real example that the technical committee had to work out is when we talk about HDR source positioning. So where is the source position? Is it really at the tip of the wire? Is it the middle act of the source? Is it the middle of the physical length? Sounds like nitpicking at one point, but when we talk about things like HDR, when you're talking about steps of 5 millimeters, perhaps, being off by a few millimeters in the definition, if people define it differently, could be an issue. So this is one of the things that was actually tackled, and seems like minutia, but these things all contribute and add up to interoperability issues or problems. Now, IHE does not write standards. What we do is refine standards that exist, and the two main ones we work with are DICOM and HL7, and I would imagine that most people are familiar with those, but if you wanted to learn more, there are links there on the slide, and these slides will be available later on. They'll be posted online on the IHE website. But what we do is we try to refine it, and an example from DICOM is DICOM may say you can do something using one method or using a second method. Well, if one system uses a first method and the other system uses a second method, they may not communicate all that information accurately because they're using two different methods of transmitting that information. In IHE, what we do is we refine that, so we say if you're IHE compliant, it's one set of specific information that's being transmitted, and the information has specific meanings. It's not open to interpretation. Again, we talked about the scope. What we're trying to do is streamline workflow and interoperability. The sponsor was originally ASTRO, but in 2017, AAPM took over oversight of IHE-RO. ASTRO is still significantly involved and definitely helps us in our activities, and dates back to 2004, the original IHE-RO group, and 17 countries are currently involved in the committees. And that includes vendors, interested parties, medical centers. We do have a steering committee, and the steering committee is the oversight committee for the planning and technical committees. Coordinate between the two. We meet on a monthly basis, and also the steering committee is our liaison in with AAPM leadership, and also still to some degree with ASTRO as well. Jill is our secretary. She's our secretary for all the committees. Co-chairs are Bruce and Bridget. So that's the oversight committee. We have a planning committee. And in planning committee, we're charged with getting the use cases and gathering the information about issues people are having, put together the use cases, and then we try to pick people that, or ask for volunteers that would be champions to further work with and refine these use cases, and we prioritize them. And then we work in concert with the technical committee to, with their help and guidance, to try to figure out what we should implement. We also try to do some recruitment to get people involved in these committees, because without vendors, without medical centers, without people who work in the real world, none of this really works out well. We also do some education materials and present. You may have seen a presentation at AAPM. There's a meeting people were invited to, and we've done various presentations at AAPM and ASTRO as well, and also this webinar. For this, the co-chair, the physician co-chair is Mary. The physicist co-chair is Alf, and I am the vendor co-chair. And if you wanted more detail on what we do, those links on the bottom have been updated to the current ones, so they will actually be the correct ones. We do have a wiki that covers planning committee, technical committee, some of the profiles, and a lot of information you might find useful. Our technical committee is the committee I consider that does, and this is my opinion, but does the bulk of the work, because they do the actual implementation. They do recruit vendors to work with them, and we always are looking for people who are interested in a particular workflow or a particular profile that's under development, people who work in the clinic, to help us understand what the needs are so that we make sure we get this as good as we can. But they're the ones that come up with all the details and work all the finer points of the profiles. And the secretary, again, is Jill there. The co-chair are Chris and Scott, who's on the call. And there's the links for the wiki that deals with what we do on the technical committee.